evening. Hello. My name is Jessica Young, and I'm here from the events team for tonight's event featuring the delightful author Cassandra Khaw and their new book, The Salt Grows Heavy. We are here with a conversation featuring the other delightful author, Paul Tremblay. But before we hear from these brilliant speakers, we request that you keep your mobile phones on silent during this event. And if you haven't yet picked up your pre-ordered book, I will be at the back table over there, and you are more than welcome to come and grab it. Also, if you want to buy this book or many other titles, we have them all back there waiting for you to come hang out with me and buy all of the books. At the end of the event, we will have a signing, and the line is going to actually work its way to the store going this way, and so you'll come and be able to meet our wonderful author up here. And we also want you to be aware that this is being live streamed, so unless you want to, be on the internet, please don't walk in front of this camera and use this way from your exit. But yes, now for the main event, I want to thank Paul Tremblay for moderating the event this evening. As a local friend here in Boston, he has won the Bram Stoker, British Fantasy, and Massachusetts Book Awards. He has also authored many titles, including The Pallbearers Club, Survivor Song, Growing Things, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and A Head Full of Ghosts. And his novel, The Cabin at the End of the World, has been recently adapted as a major motion picture. His essays and short fiction have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Entertainment Weekly Online, and numerous years' best anthologies. But the conversation is going to be here to feature the wonderful author we are ecstatic to have, USA bestseller of Nothing But Black and Teeth, an award-winning game writer, and an award-nominated author, a former scriptwriter for Ubisoft Montreal, the Cassandra Khaw. Yay! Their work can be found in places like the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Lightspeed, and Tor.com. Khaw's first original novel, Hammers on Bones, was a British Fantasy Award and Locust Award finalist. But today we are here to discuss the delightful new book, The Salt Grows Heavy. It is a perfect mix of fantasy and self-discovery, and I'm so excited for this conversation. So without further ado, please help me welcome our wonderful authors.
Thank you, Jessica.
Hello? All right, mine works.
Hello. Uh-oh. There we go.
Red light means on.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
We swear this is part of the act. It's all intentional.
Okay, here we go. Hey, how you doing?
Good, terrified, nervous. It's my first I can never pronounce a word when I'm under stress. I am not a small, fuzzy animal, I swear. But really happy to be in Boston. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, same. Well, I'm here a lot, but I'm always happy to be here. Are you going to read a little bit from your book?
Oh, sure, if you like.
Right? Yeah, I think that's sort of somewhat discuss that. Let's see. You just going to pick it open from random?
Why would you do that to me? Is it because I wouldn't help you finish the Brussels sprouts?
We got way too many Brussels sprouts. That's true. Well, before they start, I would say I thought it was important that they do read because the voice in the prose is really such a component and really part of the theme of the story, I think. So.
You're the kind. Can I just read a little bit from the first chapter of the book? Where are you going? I paused. In the penumbra, the fading dusk were jetted by coral and gold. You could be forgiven for mistaking the ruined house a ribcage, the roof its tent of ragged skin, the foundation at a careless look to pass for bones, the door for a mouth, the chimney a finger crooked at the sky, or a wife who would not be a savior. Ash sleets from the firmament in soft handfuls of black, gathering gauzy drifts around my ankles. The sky is ink and seething murk, whispering secrets to itself. The clouds snarled like long, dark hair. I glance into the house. Two of my daughters look back at me, eyes shining. They are seated astride a twitching form, its limbs too small to belong to an adult. Like cats, they croon to one another, even as they nibble their fins and fingertips clean. My breath snags. Only days old, but already they're the best of their parents. They have their father's full lips, his blue eyes, his supple sun-warmed skin. And they have my teeth, my deep water hair, like the lures of the anglerfish spun into thick coils. Nothing sticks to those radiant strands, no amount of gore or mud, which is fortunate, given how messily my offspring eat. One fishes a gnawed down finger bone from her maw, flicks it to the ground, the other pounces. And for a moment I glimpsed the fair circle of their victim's face, its eyes gouged, its cheeks flensed, its skull emptied of sweetbreads. Mermaids, especially those born half-prince, leave nothing to waste. Of course, I forgot. You can't speak. My apologies. I look back. The plague doctor flutters a hand, voice strange behind their mask. Today they are dressed most austerely. Plain black robes, a broad-brimmed hat, the half-skull of a vulture, carefully bleached, an ornamented save for a single hieroglyph embossing its brow. Alone are my husband's people, what few remain after the apocalypse of my children's hunger. The plague doctor is not afraid, has not ever been afraid. Do you know where you're going? I considered the question. I toyed with the idea of going home. In my dreams, I still swim that soundless black still travel its eddies of salt and cold nothing. My sisters are alive in these nocturnal fantasies, colorless, resplendent, their hair floating like frothing of wedding veils. But those are just baseless images, pieced together by the unconscious, invoked by a longing that's long since had time to turn septic. I've been on dry land for too long. The depths would devour me than would any creature of the air. Well, the plague doctor steps closer, fearless, eyes green as the humid, hated summer. I shrug. To my astonishment, they laugh. Such a pair we make. I don't know what I'm going to do either, what with the kingdom being eaten to nothing. The look they slide me, heavy-lidded, coy, is so audacious that I soundlessly laugh in spite of myself. If you don't know where you're going, do you at least know what you plan to do? I shrugged again. Over the snow-gilded mountains, I know there are kingdoms without number, pastoral and beautiful, each ruled by another prince or king, another czar and his court of calm-eyed lackeys, another man like my husband, beautiful and terrible and cocksure in the magic tea from his bride. There, I could go there perhaps. Find another sovereign who would fish a mute from the waters, who'd marry her, bed her, murder her sisters for superstition, and have pried a teeth from her gums for the sake of caution. I could find one of those again, maybe, and wait until my daughters come to gnaw his country down to its bones. As though conscious of my musings, the plague doctor nods, their voice hollowed by the fluted bone. Even after all this time, I cannot tell whether they are male, female, neither or both, some gradient wicking between definitions. And you shall know her by the trail of death, a harpy phrase. I smile at the music of it. How do you feel about company? I cock my head. A doctor is always useful, they tell me. Fox sly. What do you say? I say nothing, of course. My husband cut the tongue from me when he discovered I was pregnant, braised it with 5 spice and saffron before feeding me the tender slivers. Animal meat was forbidden, but this a soothsayer had pruned with ensure pliance. But I smile nonetheless, and it is answer enough for my new companion. We burned the kingdom to cinders. Pillars of choking smoke rose from the bodies we heaped into neat stacks, stinging fattily, saltily of crisping pork. The plague doctor had insisted. To leave the bodies as they were was to invite disease, an epidemic that would rot the soil, infect the waters. What is the point of revenge if you can't enjoy it? The plague doctor chuckled, as they lent me on my chocolate-stippled horse. My husband's last gift before our children made a feast of him, a sullen gelding who loathed him as much as I did, from the smoldering ruins. I offered no reply, and as I watched the smoke, my warnings of what would be. Oh.
Bad life choices, I have multiple glasses, so. Thank you, that was wonderful. I'm going to save the where the story came from question for next, but since you've read that part, which talks about the mermaid basically destroying the kingdom after what had happened to her, I think elsewhere, that whole story right there is like another story. It's another novel. I think it's really interesting that you start there at the end of something that begins something else. So at the start of writing this book, did you know that's where you were going to start The Mermaid's Tale, sort of after, I guess after the aftermath?
Yeah. So I wrote a short story in 2016 for a magazine called The Dark. It was entitled "And in Our Daughters We Find a Voice." And I kind of wanted to explore the Little Mermaid story, take it to a very, very dark conclusion. And at the very end of it, I won't spoil it, it's in the book somewhere, at the back actually, her children swarm up and she opens the window and they pour out and into the kingdom, and that's kind of where it ends, with the beginning of her revenge against that kingdom. So with that book, one of the things I've been exploring lately with my fiction is the idea of generational sacrifice. I am from a really traditionally Asian family, they're all immigrants, and I've spent my whole life being told countless people have given up everything to ensure you are here and you can continue the legacy. And then I appreciate that. It is noble. It is the work of so many people I will never meet. But it is also a kind of cycle that troubles me. The idea, especially of mothers, just pouring their whole life into their children, refuse the autonomy that they warrant, and just told to stand at the side while their children continue on. I feel a kind of resentment and grief towards it. So with The Mermaid and the devastation that would have followed, much as I would have liked to write a war that would have come out of that, I didn't want it to be a story for children. I wanted her to have her own tale, and that's kind of why we began there instead.
Great answer. And just a general service announcement to everybody out there. Most of my questions won't be questions. They'll probably be like, hey, this is really cool. Can you talk more about it? Yeah. In that vein, so like maybe you sort of answered the question a little bit. Like, so this book, did it all grow out of that short story? Was when you finished that story like, oh, I want to tell what happens next? But even if that's the case, what's the kernel that led to sort of, without spoilers obviously, like that led to, the plague doctor and everything else that happens?
It kind of ties to that first bit. I wanted her to have that autonomy. I wanted her to have the conclusion of her own story. Ultimately, mermaids are kind of metaphors for that loss of personal autonomy. It is literally someone that's been fished out of the water, who has walked out of the water and told, this is the happily ever after you're looking for. Even if you look at Disney's version of Ariel, she kind of gets a fascination with human artifacts instead. And she kind of grows the assumption this is where she wants to be. Sorry, I kind of panicked a bit on that answer.
That's a great answer. So actually maybe building off that a little bit, in the beginning, I don't know if you quite got to the line, but it happens very early. You describe the plague, or refer to the plague doctor and the mermaid as manufactured beings, which is a line that I sat with for a little while, because I think it's literal in a lot of ways based on what happens to the characters in the story, but also metaphorical. So I don't know, again, I'm leaving it open-ended so you can talk about it the way you want it without spoiling sort of like the big things that happen. But
The without spoiling part is so hard every single time.
sorry.
I thought we were friends. Why did you throw me the hardball question? What did I do to you, man?
This is my third interview. I ran out of my easy questions.
This is good to know. This is advice for everyone else who might be interviewed by Paul in the future. If you get to the third interview, be careful. That's where the hard questions come from.
Right.
As I sort of touched on earlier on, the mermaid is a product of other people's expectations. In the short story, it digs into how she is turned into a queen, how she is subjected to so much pageantry. She's walked through balls, she's told, yes, this is our princess, this is that. She's given taffeta and gauze. And this is a monstrous carnivore. So she endures it. And once she's done with the trauma and her life there, I guess in a weird way, it's also a metaphor for how we exist after bad things happen to us. We are products of it, whether we like it or not. If we learn from it, if we grow from it, we are still shaped by whatever it scarred us. Similarly, the plague doctor would, oh God, how do I do this without spoiling the plague doctor? God damn it, Paul.
He has a mask. He has a plague doctor mask.
They have a mask.
They, right, sorry.
But they were a child and they were subjected to things that they never consented to. They were, in some ways, the product of their parents and tortured and once again just forced into shape. In the plague doctor's case, it's exceedingly literal now that I think about it. Jeez. And actually, I would say the same for the mermaid as well. This body that she now inhabits is totally alien to her.
Right. No, I mean, she goes through some transformations, like in physical description as well,
Mhm.
like, for sure. All right, I do have an easy one for you, I think.
I don't believe you anymore.
Well, titles are hard. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Did you start the book with The Salt Grows Heavy as a title, or was that something you came up on?
Oh God, no. It was halfway into writing the book and frantically reaching out to friends with what do I call this? I cannot just call it the mermaid book. If I call it the mermaid book, my editors will yell at me. I tried. An editor actually did yell at me, tell me I have to put an actual title. But the title kind of came up from listening a lot to this one singer, Ivor. I believe she's Icelandic, and the best description I have for her music is she's kind of like Enya but evil. Adore her as an artist, and one of her songs I believe was titled Salt, and that was the one that I kept listening to on repeat. And a friend of mine actually helped me brainstorm. Sorry, now I have a beak as well. Brainstorm the title, and that's how it happened. So now the title came much later and out of a lot of desperation.
Well, I mean, it's a great title. My only like 2-bit piece of advice for writers is I'll never start a book without a title again. Like I did it once and it almost killed me. So, but the happy ending of your story is that you found a good title. It's really cool.
Although I will say that I'm kind of envious of video games for the way they can title things. Untitled Goose Game still delights me, and I wish I can do that with a book. Like just like Entitled Murder, but here you go. Maybe I'll try that.
All right. Somewhat tied to video games. Not really. I was trying to tie it to it. This book is gory as F, as the young people say.
Is that what the young people say?
Well, they say that when they type it. Like, have you reached the age where, like, sometimes I'll read my text aloud as I'm typing them, and I catch myself doing it, I'm like, wow, that's like an old thing to do.
Yeah,
So I'll say
I'm
gory as F when I
literally
text. Anyway, there's tons of gore.
we're all getting old.
But like how it's described, I mean, I hate talking about a book and comparing it to a TV show, but like I'm going to compare it briefly to how gore is done in the Hannibal TV show, because it's grotesquely beautiful. And like you described it that way purposely. I mean, there were certainly times where I was like, wow, that's really gross, but also like, wow, that's really beautiful. But it's all essential to the story. So I don't know if, besides my blathering about the gore, if you want to talk about like what you were thinking, the decision, you know, as to how like sort of in depth and detailed that you do go with the gore.
Oh, so I firmly believe that violence gets romanticized a lot, especially in like TV and film. Most of what you see, even if it's a disembowelment, it's just a lot of red intestine, a lot of blood. Somebody makes a scream and they fall over to the side. But the reality of it, it's more colorful. Lots of gray, lots of green, dear God, lots of green, and lots of brownish stuff, depending on what parts of the large intestine you cut into. I have far too much knowledge of this. And I think when we see Hollywood's version of it, the sanitized version of it, I think that almost teaches us not to worry as much about what's happening in the world around us. You see one gunshot and the person drops. You shrug, because 1,000 TV series have told you it's just this brief moment and the guy is gone. And with my work with the core, one of the things I want to do is remind people, all of these is terrible. Even something as simple as a broken bone, a sprain, that can devastate a person for months, for years. And when I write, I go into that detail because I want people to look at the news and pause and think twice about whether they're going to click away or they're going to ask questions about it and push, just maybe see an end of all this horror. It's a lofty ambition, but it's just a thing that's kind of worked itself into my brain. Also, I was really a macabre kid. I really wanted to work in forensics when I was a child. And at 18, I waddled up to my mom and I was like, I want to study to be a coroner. And my mother looked at me and went, no child of mine will ever play with a corpse. Go away, go study computers. I'm like, okay. Years later, I write it instead.
Denied corpse playing. Got it. I'm going to use a quote against you, not against you. I'm going to present you something you wrote about this book on the day it came out on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you wrote her in part because I wanted to capture what it feels like to have night terrors. So I don't know if that's something that you would want to expand on or talk about, like the experience of, like, or let me ask it this way. Did any dreams directly sort of influence this, or other stories that are direct from your dreams, you know? Or?
Nothing directly, but so this is partially because my parents were terrible. At the age of 8, they decided the best thing to do was encourage me to watch John Carpenter's The Thing with my eyes wide open. This continued on. I've seen every single gory thing possible from the 80s at a very inappropriate age. I think I was 12 when I watched Cannibal Holocaust. There was a choice that they made. So the night terrors are partially from that. And partially, I don't know what else. But there's always this strangeness when I lurch awake. I still have them today. The smear of colors, shadows that are too cold, lights that are too vivid, a sense that I'm trying to escape something or I'm trying to figure out the puzzle. But then it slowly slips away and it just drains through my hands. And with the salt grows heavy, I wanted to bring that out. And I know most people don't have them. And night terrors are not fun, but there's something kind of darkly beautiful about them. And I like to share things like that because I'm a terrible person, question mark.
No, you're not terrible. You're sharing. Quick one, like it's yes or no. Did you write this in New York City or pre-move during?
Pre-move.
Pre-move, okay.
My pre-move.
I was just curious. You talked about this a little bit before, but having read your other works, and I'm going to have a question connecting Black and Teeth with this after. But you've talked about how you've moved around a lot, obviously, in your life. And the thing that I find really interesting about your fiction is the sense of place and how you present it. It seems to me very you, very sort of your voice, and how it's detailed, but also what it means to the characters. In particular in this story, the mermaid, you talk about her being like literally displaced. And then, I hope this isn't a big spoiler, but like with the idea maybe her home is actually another person kind of thing. So again, not a question, an observation that you can react to if you'd like.
I'm going to steal that line for the next time I interview someone. It's like an observation you can react to. It's good work. So for those who don't know, I was nomadic for about 10 years of my life. So every 3 months it was going to be a different continent. When you travel that way, it's difficult to create a sense of connection with anyone. You can make friends, you can reconnect with them a year in, but there is none of that granular affection. There is no way of really cementing yourself in a place. And as much as I was nomadic, I am still a human being, and all human beings long for that sense of connection, for that sense of belonging somewhere. Place became important to me. I had rituals in every city, things I had to do, places I had to go and visit, statues I had to see and pat or drink a coffee beside. It was how I grounded myself in time and space. And I think a lot of it came into this book, partially because I think I wanted someone like the plague doctor for the longest time, someone who would wander with me, but the circumstances of life that was an impossibility. And so, some of that longing that seeped through.
All right, so Nothing But Black and Teeth was obviously a huge hit. And in that story, there's many things that happen. But in that story, the interpersonal relationships are very, very squishy, toxic, like complex. Let's say that, right? Whereas here, I think that's one of the big differences is the main relationship that occurs between the mermaid and the plague doctor. I mean, I would say it's almost like 180 degree turn from Nothing But Black Teeth. So it was kind of interesting to sort of think about those two stories and how those relationships differed. Did you find yourself, like, after writing Nothing But Black Teeth, like longing to write, like, you know, for lack of a better phrase, a love story, or writing, you know, a different kind of relationship? Did you feel any sort of connection between those two stories?
A little bit, I think. And I think it ties slightly with the fact, like, I am getting older. And with Nothing But Black and Teeth, the main relationship dynamic I wanted to explore is we all have friends that we've been friends with since we were children. And over the years, they've grown progressively more toxic, more terrible, to the point where when we go out with them, we're like, I am embarrassed of this person. I don't know why I spent 3 hours with them, but I've known them for 20 years. And eventually, I think once you hit a certain age, you know how to disconnect from these personalities, but not always. And Nothing But Black and Teeth was me exploring what would happen if, again, you take it to a natural dark conclusion and put people who actually hate each other in a remote place and give them an excuse to do terrible things to one another. But in a weird way, after that, I wanted to study what love is like outside of traditional depictions of it in media. We have familial love, we have the self-sacrificial maternal love, we absolutely have the romantic Hallmark love. But what we don't see is love that comes after loss, love that emerges when you're not capable of offering all of yourself. You can only offer whatever mutilated remains that you have. Love as it is put together after immense trauma. The kind of things no one ever talks about, but the kind of relationships that stay with us until we are old and gray and sitting by each other's, deathbeds, making jokes about it. So, yeah, actually, now that you've mentioned it, there is definitely a tie between those two. I've talked about the worst of what people can be, and I want to look at the best of them.
No, I definitely get that for sure. And I feel like both stories start from almost like a place of rage or a well of rage, but sort of take that anger, which is, rage is something you should feel. It's not a thing to be ashamed of.
I am a queer person of color from a third world country. I am just rage at this point. I don't think it's possible to be anything but angry.
Yeah. Oh, you should have seen that at the restaurant. Let me tell you.
Why do you slander me?
There was kicking, cousin kicking. Oh no,
No, my cousin kicked me instead.
Okay, all right, retracted. Right, man, I think we're going to go to the lightning round. So it doesn't have to be super lightning fast. I'm stealing this from James Lipton from the Actors Studio. So it'll be fine, mostly. The first one's going to be very easy. Since you mentioned Little Mermaid, Ariel. Do you think there's any chance Disney is going to make Salt Crow's Head?
Only if they get a brain injury. Next.
What would be your favorite spice scents to put inside your plate mask?
My favorite spice scents to put inside my plate mask, either frangipani, lilac, or fresh lavender from the overgrown lavender bush that I've been raising.
I do have a mathematics degree, but that's 3 spices. I'm just kidding.
How dare you, sir?
How about something, how about least favorite? Not something that's obviously stinky, but something that people, like maybe a lot of people like that aroma, but you think would just be too much to deal with, like in the plate mask.
Are we talking about ethically sourced scents?
Yeah, whatever you want, whatever comes to mind. It's the lightning round.
Marzipan. I can't stand the smell of marzipan, I'm sorry. It reminds me far too much of medicine from my childhood.
You don't have to apologize. So, I'm just going to say it this way. Land monster or sea creature?
Sea creature.
And you want to elaborate on that? I know it's lightning round, you're supposed to go fast, but. Okay,
You
never mind. What's the hardest workout exercise? If anyone follows their Instagram, your weightlifting and
Yeah, I have a chronic
personal trainer, etc.
Yeah, I'm a chronic weightlifter. I do enjoy picking heavy things up and putting them down. Renegade rows with 25 pounds my trainer likes inflicting them on me when we're doing leg day, and it's the worst. I hate renegade
So can you
rows.
describe that, 'cause I don't know what that is.
You go into a push-up position, you go down, get up, lift one hand, lift the other, and then you do a burpee somewhere in between all of that. Because, again, my trainer apparently really likes it when I scream at him.
Okay, I'm gonna time this for 1 minute. You have 1 minute of cat talk. Talk like your cats.
Meow,
Tell
meow,
people
meow,
what
meow.
they-
Oh, different cat.
No, talk like a cat. Tell the very nice people about your 2 cats.
I have 2 very large Maine Coons, one orange, one tortoiseshell. They're about this large, and they will inform me every now and then when they want attention in a certain way. The orange one will crawl onto my chest in the middle of the night. If she wants pets, she will slap me with her claws extended until I wake up to give her pets. I am technically a captive prisoner at this point. They're also very fluffy, and I love them very much.
The other one doesn't jump on you as much?
The other one's very smart, but she's trying to learn doors. I have seen her go up to my front door every now and then, stretch out. It's all bat at the handle, sit down, and so look at it, and it's like, I know how this works, but why can't I make this work? And I'm terrified of the day she realizes how to do it.
All right. You have 15 seconds to spare. Perfect. What's your favorite city to visit? So you're not living there necessarily. Your favorite city you visited?
Reykjavik was definitely one of my favorite cities. I love Tokyo dearly. St. Louis Obispo, I can never remember the name. Small Californian resort town. It was really gorgeous. Also, I like Boston for the beer.
Yeah, Boston. A favorite city you've lived in?
New York. I loved it so much I came straight back.
So I think this might be the last one. When you were reading, you actually mentioned the word, phrase, and we talked about this briefly, sweetbreads. Just the concept of sweetbreads to me just makes me want to become a vegetarian. But you were describing, actually I want you to describe for everybody before we take questions, the best way to prepare sweetbreads.
Deep fried with the time was planned specifically as to be prepared in a way I can't remember offhand. But if you do it just right, it essentially turns into savory custard. And if you wrap it up in good breading, kind of just like a savory cream puff.
Now, because I actually did spend 5 minutes Googling sweetbreads. Is it just particular organs, or is it any sort of innards can be considered sweetbreads?
I think there is a particular set of organs that is considered.
Pancreas or something?
Yeah, it depends on definitions, I think. People seem to have different ideas of what are sweetbreads. Weirdly enough, I will not do liver. I can't stand the iron taste.
I don't. All right. Well, I've run out of questions because they've answered them so succinctly and perfectly. So we'll open up to questions from you all.
I could tell you how
The
to
first
cook
one's the
more organs.
hardest. If no one asks questions, I will ask math questions.
No, please God, no. I'm a writer for a reason. Don't let me mouth me down.
First one, I'm looking around. You want to ask something?
The pressure is mounting. Everyone's looking in your direction. You must figure out your words.
Let me read the book.
In the back.
In the back. Someone has come to save you.
Yes. So I've read everything of yours
Oh, thank you.
from Black and Teeth until now. And it seems like you've been exploring similar themes throughout those books of
Mhm.
interpersonal connections and different ways to show them. Is that something that you feel like you're going to continue in the future, or do you feel like you've had enough of that and you want to branch out to something else?
My answer, I think, is going to be so tropey. I expect I'm going to continue digging into a lot of it, partially because this is the first time in my life I felt safe in a home away from abusive family members. And my books, in many ways, are me processing through it. And it's been almost 40 years of a lot of trauma. So their books are going to be talking about interpersonal relationships or while I deal with that.
Good. Been living it so far.
Yes. Any more? Actually, while you're thinking, since you brought up briefly, I think you brought up writing for video game scripts. how difficult was that transitioning from, because I assume at times you were like by day writing video game scripts and then by night or later in the same day working on fiction. Was that hard to shift? Like what was it, maybe what's a great lesson that you took from working on video game scripts and applied to fiction as well?
I'm still working video games. I'm mostly doing work for Weeby Montreal right now and for another company that I can't talk about because of NDAs. And writing video games and writing fiction is completely different, at least to me. For one, when you're working on video games, you are not writing a story for the sake of the story. It is almost in service of a collective vision, not just in terms of like what a creative director is talking about, but also what art wants to do, what the programming people want to do, what design wants to do, the kind of gameplay loops that they are exploring. And with video games, you have to be ready to give up any of your darlings for that beast that is the main game. The other bit about it is, with linear media, whether we're talking about books, radio plays, TV, film, what have you, there's almost this covenant between the creator and the consumer. So the creator says, come along with me for a journey of X amount of hours. I cannot guarantee that you will enjoy it, but you know I will lead you by hand to the natural conclusion of this. Video games, on the other hand, is almost creating an illusion. You are telling the player, you can go anywhere you want. This world is wider than what you see. And you lie endlessly to the player about it while gently nudging them along the critical path you need them to go. So they're vastly different. And I think because they're vastly different, I've been able to do like an 8-hour day job and write on the side at the same time. But I will say that video games have taught me to let go a lot of that sense of fear and ego. At the end of the day, words are words, creation is creation. There will always be something new, and there will always be an opportunity to recycle an idea, to elevate it, to make it something superior than what it was. Also, video games pays better.
Go here first, a second.
Drawing from the first question, I did notice that a lot of your art is kind of like an auto exorcism. And I wanted to know, like, from which direction does that come from? Do you just write there like, oh, this is forming up, let's dig into that? Or are you just digging into that and then expunge that into a page?
Oh, the first one, actually. Most of the books start as like flashes of inspiration or just brief ideas or emotions that have been tugging at me. And I think it's because of the video game background. The idea of just wandering off on a tangent doesn't work. I want the logic and the underlying design behind it. So I built and I built and built. And the books happen when there is enough of a logical conclusion. There are a lot of half-written drafts, and I don't know where I'm going with this. Bye.
So do you ever like pre-plan or pre-plot like stories?
Not before this. Most of it was instinctual, but the new novel that I'm working on, not the one with Richard Tadry, I have 10,000 words of outline on that one. I have no idea what to do with myself. This is a very new place to go.
Sort of a two-part question. Picking up on what you said earlier, who was the Icelandic evil Enya, and do you have like identifiable musical influences on your writing?
Ivor. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Eivor. I write mostly in silence. I think it's because English is actually a third language of mine. And it's one of the reasons why my work is so baroque. I didn't approach English as a natural way of communicating. Instead, it is this weird landscape of toys, a playground that I can wander through and just kind of pick up things. And if you start reading into a lot of books that like investigate place words and stuff, you realize how much things are magpied and how specific and granular the language can go. Robert McFarlane's Landmarks is my favorite example of that. There is one bit where he talks about wolf light, WOLF light. And it is the last light of the day before night comes. And he compares it to the color of a wolf's eyes in the dusk. And I'm like, I love stuff like that. So because of that, and because my mother tongue is tonal, when I'm listening to music, all I hear is the music on loop over and over and over again. But generally, musical influence, dark Americana, weird folk metal. I really like The Who. Bollywood is a recent favorite. I listen to a lot of jazz, hip hop, trance occasionally. And I really like country pop.
I have a Buzzcocks t-shirt. I just wanted to say that. Music, a music teacher. Any more questions? More? Yes.
Hello.
I was just wondering what your, for the both of you, horror movie inspirations, or, yeah.
You first.
You
I've
first?
been answering all night.
Well, I mean, I wrote one book, sort of like when my British publicist gets really angry when I describe it this way. But my novel, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, I think could be fairly called fan fiction of Lake Mungo, an Australian movie. But really that book is I took 3 Australian movies and sort of smushed them together. Lake Mungo, Picnic and Hanging Rock, which is in the title. And that was the book I started that I didn't have a title. I still don't like the title, Disappearance at Devil's Rock. I mean, it's fine, but it wasn't like, it still drives me crazy. And a third one is probably lesser known, brutal movie called Snowtown Murders. It's a really good movie, but the kind of thing you can only watch once. Yeah, so I mean, movies, I mean, that was my first, I was much more an avid movie watcher before I became a reader. So that was really my first sort of, introduction to storytelling, was all through movies. So yeah, I'm often reacting to movies or thinking about movies and their stories.
Mostly Southeast Asian horror for me. That is the stuff I grew up with. A lot of Western cinema is. So I moved into a little bit of a segue. Someone wrote this, and I completely agree with it. Western horror almost mimics the idea of like New World colonization. This is where you belong. This is the normal, and it's the creepiness that's sneaking in, and that is the invasive intruder. Southeast Asian horror movies and Southeast Asian horror in general sort of recognizes the fact that everything wants to kill you dead, and the only reason you are alive at that one exact moment is because they are distracted with better prey. It's true. The jungles are terrifying places to be bad. God, I got lost in one once. It was not fun. The amount of leeches I had to pull off after that. But yeah, Southeast Asian horror in the sense that they will drop you into a thing and they will go, these are the rules, roll with it. Why is it like that? I don't know. The larger world is inexplicable. And I think Southeast Asian horror definitely has an influence on how gory I like things to be. In Gore, if no one's watched it, is a great Indonesian horror film.
Yeah, we still got like 5 minutes or so at least. Yeah.
So to build off the inspiration question, I know both of you like to kind of draw from classic stories in your works. Like you've got The Little Mermaid being kind of retold in a revenge story here, but also a love story. And Paul, you've got like the Head Full of Ghosts, which is kind of a play on The Exorcist mixed with like reality TV shows and whatnot. So do you both have certain stories that you come back to kind of remix and reimagine?
Oh, that's a
Is there
good
anything
question.
that you'd like to work on that you haven't yet?
What? Fine.
I prefer-
A source of constant inspiration, I think, are the animal wives stories across the world. As has been clear, I think, over the last hour, I'm fascinated with how often women in particular are told they are supposed to be assimilated into the function that they're given. And I think the animal wives demonstrates that beautifully. Some depictions of the Korean wife are like, oh, she falls in love and then he makes a mistake, and how tragic it is. But ultimately, it's a story of a man who stole a woman's wings and went like, well, you're my wife now, good luck. And I think given the current political landscape, that is the kind of fable I find myself going back to. It will continue going back to for a while.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a specific thing I keep going back to. I mean, aside from like, I think we all have like favorite things that we revisit. But I hope I'm trying not to like rewrite that same story. But just sort of in general, I don't know, that the reason why like I even started messing around with writing was I started from a place of admiration, being a fan. Like I love these books. I love how they make me feel, and I want to try to take a spark from that. If I take a few sparks, I can maybe build a different kind of fire, kind of thing. Is how I tend to approach it. Especially if it's a horror, like you're in this genre that's, it's been around for a sort of set time. In some ways, there are obviously all sorts of different ways to approach it, but like, I feel like every time you write something horror, you get to join in a conversation with something that precedes it. And to me, that's why I would like write a horror story, because you want to, why wouldn't you take advantage of the fact that all these other stories have already been told? Maybe you get to sort of, flip it around, you get to recontextualize it. Or if nothing else, like it makes someone else think about something, think about their favorite movie in a different way, or their favorite book in a different way. I don't know, that's the part that, the fan service part of me is that part of it. Like I want to be adjacent to the cool things that I like.
I think that's true for all writers ultimately. We're just a bunch of nerds who are very fascinated with things we got very lucky.
Very lucky, yeah.
Okay.
To go off of that, I was just interested in knowing if there was a particular author for both of your particular book or movie that was that sort of spark person, and then who would be kind of like the person that you would maybe aspire to be, like the person that
You first.
look to when you're trying to do better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last one, the answer is easy, because I mean, there were so many amazing, people working in horror fiction today. Like they all inspire me. I mean, two of them are sitting here. Cassandra Khaw and Eric LaRocca is over here as well. No, all my contemporaries like really inspire me. Like, I mean, that I'll have a moment of jealousy, like, dude. But that's like an excited thing. I was like, yeah, and I feel like it forces me to want to try to be better. I mean, if I had my druthers, I'd rather be sitting on the couch and watching TV or playing a video game. It's work to get up and to build up like the self-strength to be like, all right, I'm gonna try to write this thing that like, people might read and then judge, that takes some inner, for me it does, it takes some sort of inner thing to do. But to sort of go backwards, I was a math major in college and I ended up in a English 101 class my last semester senior year, which is kind of weird. But so in that class I read, and the teacher was really cool, like he liked punk music, so that helped get me engaged. But we read two stories, and I compared those two stories to a Jane's Addiction song Ted just invented. I remember that paper that I wrote. But the stories were T.C. Boyle's Greasy Lake and Joyce Carol Oates' Where Are You Going, Where Are You Going? I remember when I read those two stories, I was like, oh, I didn't know people wrote things like this. And that really turned me into a reader after that. But the writer that like really is blowing my socks off right now is Mariana Enriquez, and her newest book, Our Share of Night, it's one of my favorite books. It's one of my favorite books that I've read it twice already. Yeah, so I highly recommend her. She has some short story collections that are amazing as well. That novel is the real deal.
I'm gonna riff off
Yeah.
what Paul said. I'm fascinated and delighted and constantly inspired by the landscape of contemporary writers. With globalization and the ease of access to the world, everyone has the internet, everyone has ways of going to various virtual workshops, virtual festivals and all that. You just see this explosion of talent. And again, with the English language being my third language, I'm fascinated with how other people make use of English, especially South Asian authors in particular, because there is a musicality that I recognize because a lot of my own lyricism comes from a tonal background. And how they work with language and how they change it, and the kind of stories that come up from remote places and what they talk about, it blows my mind. It demands and interrogates my own work as a first generation immigrant, I guess, at this point. And yeah, like Paul, I constantly want to be better for that reason. But in terms of a very specific author who it was that spark, was actually a middle grade author, Frances Harding. I picked up her book, A Face Like Glass, and I was like, this is the best book. Finished 700 pages in about a day and a half, went, all right, I have to buy everything else in her backlist right now. Bought every single thing, finished it, sat down, and I was like, wait, all these books are meant for kids between the ages of 10 to 13, what? And it fascinated me because there is such a lean, elegant poetry to all of her prose, and the issues that she deals with. Unraveler, for example, talks about how hate accumulates as a result of abuse and how it comes out in a cycle and what you have to do to break it. There are very intelligent adult things in there. But she also has a way of making them utterly approachable when it comes to 10-year-olds, and that kind of talent, being able to balance both worlds. I have no idea how she does it, but I want to do something like that one day. Sorry, guy in purple, we have talked forever.
Oh, no worries. That's why I'm here. I was I was wondering, the first works of yours I've read were Nothing But Blackened Teeth and A Head Full of Ghosts, and I feel like I've been on a reading kick lately of, I like how we've talked about so many like different ways of looking at like kind of classic tropes. This is for both of you, do either of you have either a favorite haunted house story or one that you've enjoyed a lot lately? Because I feel like I just finished Sarah Gailey's latest book, Just Like Home, and I felt like there's so much. Yeah, I felt like there's just so many like levels of like, this could be just like a cliche like during Halloween or something that like really digs into something deep, and I feel like there's a lot to explore. So do either of you have a haunted house book that you're enjoying right now, or is a favorite of yours?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm actually reading one right now. It's Liz Hand is writing A Haunting on the Hill. So it's with the permission of the Shirley Jackson estate. The family is allowing her to write a story set in Hill House, which is really cool. So yeah, I'm enjoying the heck out of that book. That'll be out in
October.
Yeah.
Because I stumbled across that on the other side. I was like, the hell? So it's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's good. I mean, I still have like
I think
150 pages.
I'm not certain. I think it was a while.
Yeah, so it'll be out later this year, which is, I think haunted house stories are hard to do, which is another reason why, Nothing But Blackened Teeth is such a cool book. I think Mariana Enriquez, her novel I wouldn't call a haunted house novel, but there's, because it's this big, epic, sweeping book. Oh, thank you. There is definitely a haunted house in it, though.
Okay, that's on my shelf.
But it's, that book is so disturbing and terrifying. Yeah, I mean, in the original Shirley Jackson still, it's just hard to beat the spacing on other people's haunted house novels. But John Langan's, he wrote The Fishman, which is an amazing novel. His first novel, why am I spacing on the title? Sorry, John, if you're watching.
John's
Don't
watching,
yell at me
judging
this
you
week.
so much.
House of Windows. Jesus, I stole his title for a short story. How did I not remember it? House of Windows is a very Straubian, Peter Straubian kind of haunted house.
The one that comes to mind right now, I cannot remember the author's name because I've been doing this for 3 days and I'm exhausted. But the title of the book is The September House. And it is about a couple who the wife finds their perfect house, and she's utterly in love with that house. Except the house has ghosts, all kinds of ghosts. And in a weird little twist, she refuses to leave. She's like, you know what? I have struggled so hard with the house hunting thing. This is absolutely perfect. I am not leaving. And I enjoy that a lot, I also enjoy the fact her husband mysteriously disappears. And her daughter wanders by going, so where is Dad? And she's trying to hide the fact that the house is haunted, and things just go very, very bad as they figure out what's inside the basement. So the September House, really good, really enjoying it.
One more, although, I would argue with Grady that it's actually a haunted house novel.
How to Sell a Haunted House?
Yeah, Grady Hendrix's How to Sell a Haunted House. It's a great book. It's very funny. It's very fun. It's actually really creepy at times too.
I'm in the middle of that right now.
Yeah, but it's really like a creepy doll story and not a haunted house movie.
I agree.
Yeah.
Nothing's
Yeah.
actually in the
Grady,
house.
if you're watching,
Sorry,
Grady.
Grady, it's a very good book, but we're not sure if it's a haunted house.
How are we doing on time?
Oh,
Good.
hello.
Hey, one more question? Yeah,
Yes.
we have time for one more.
How much gore is too much gore? Because you had suggested a book called Tender is the Flesh,
Oh, yeah.
and I got through a
It's
couple
hard,
chapters, and I have to pass it along because I can't get through it with the human. I don't know if anybody's read this, but it's like what the world
Yeah,
can't.
it's not a huge spoiler. It's like people are being raised and killed for meat.
Who's certain people?
Wild.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how much gore is too much? Like, is there like a line you draw, or?
For me personally, I think I draw the line at gore when it feels gratuitous, when it's just there for the pleasure of shocking and frightening people and disgusting people. And when it feels like victimization, that is the bit I cannot stand. The old splatterpunk stuff bothers me because it's very much that I'm going here is a vulnerable person, we're just going to cut them up for our amusement, and it's like, that is too much gore for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have lines that I don't cross, but they're sort of like personal ones. But in general, it sort of depends on the story. Like, Evil Dead 2 is one of my favorite movies. So, I mean, the violence in that movie is different than, for something like The Cabin at the End of the World. Like, I really tried to describe the violence in detail, similar for the same sort of reason in what Cass was talking about. It's like I wanted people to recognize this is awful things that are happening to these people. This awful atrocity is being asked of the family when there's, being asked to make a sacrifice. So, for most of my stories, because I'm not typically writing a horror comedy, maybe I should try one day. Like I try to treat the violence with dignity, if that makes sense. When I say that, I mean like to dignify, obviously the experience of the victim, but also to dignify the experience of the eyewitnesses. Because I mean, if anyone's ever had the misfortune of witnessing a violent act, I mean that changes. I mean, it changes you when you see something like that. So, but again, like it depends on the story. So, just like I said, I'd be lying if like Evil Dead 2 wasn't one of my favorite books. That's a much different use of violence.
A Servant film is a hard no for me, definitely.
Yeah.
It's not a movie, do not look that up.
Okay, I think we've approached the hour. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.